My name is Zachary Conan, and if you enjoy content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and also give this video a like. David, what did you think of Jules and Jim by Francois Truffaut?
Definitely a masterpiece. Not only was I taken away by the serendipitous sort of happiness that was lofty and uplifting and very liberating, really, from so many different tropes when it comes to relationships. It was so unique, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I enjoyed most about it, was its uniqueness, because I've never seen a film or ever really dealt with a story such as this before. So this is the first time I've ever experienced anything like this. And not only the words I just used to describe the masterfulness of Truffaut and what he's doing here, but also the fact that it's an autobiographical based on a novel by the same name, Henry Roche, right?
Yeah, I believe that's how you say it.
Yeah, Henry Roche's film or novel, excuse me. And this is what's really amazing about this film in particular, is the fact that there's this truth value to it, and that has so much more.
It has a novel feel, has a literary feel to it. By the end, Truffaut is so energetic with his camera work, with the way that he captures visual information and expresses that to the audience, that by the end of the film, you feel like you've just consumed a novel's worth of information.
You really have, and that's what's amazing about it, is every scene is this really like a compacted version of that, and it's done really well. It's a lot like when I watched Lord of the Rings, because I really like Lord of the Rings, how truthful the film adaptations were to the novel. I would say it's
those are also like exhausting films, but I think that Jules and Jim can also be whereas Lord of the Rings is exhausting mostly due to length and information that you're given. But Jules and Jim, I think, is also exhausting poetically, because one of the greatest things about Jules and Jim is obviously Jean Moreau, who served as a muse for many a director, but I think Francois Truffaut photographed her the best, and that's saying a lot, because people like Wells and Louis Malle also photographed her, and Truffaut did it best in Jules and Jim. And he makes it incredibly easy to see what Jules and Jim see in this woman. In fact, before you even see her, the perfect woman has been idealized, not just drawn on a table, but also as seen in a statue. So that when you see her, she is already not, like, statuesque is the obvious metaphor, but she's already basically a goddess. And Truffaut does a very good job of having you fall in love with her as well. And by the end of the film, you are exhausted by her exploits, by her adventures, by her passions, by her demons. You're completely exhausted just trying to keep up with this woman in this film. I feel like at the end of the film, Jules walking away from the cemetery is just as exhausted as I am, and just ready to just sit down with his dragonflies and just chill out.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's wonderful about this, wonderfully done, is because it's a larger-than-life thing that is about life. And then not only that, but it goes on, and it really does paint Catherine to be a goddess. And it's like, it was almost like me watching a mythological heroine being born and then made, and then I get to like live in that moment of that birth happening. And then that whole progression of that, and then seeing the finality of it as well at the very end. And I was completely blown away and unexpected. I did not expect that ending, but I don't want to skip ahead. But
I'm a romanticist, and I'm probably just as over-sentimental as Truffaut, if not more. And I've seen a lot of people, when they do criticisms or analyses of Jules and Jim, they'll talk about it like she's like a false god, false deity or something. And I would have to argue entirely against that notion. I'm with you. Like, I'm seeing a mythological heroine being born, mostly because Truffaut gives me no indication that he thinks that she is false, that he thinks that she is unworthy of such love. If anything, Truffaut is giving me every reason to worship her. And I believe Truffaut feels the same way. I mean, if Truffaut Truffaut is brilliant and clear and coherent enough that if he didn't like this character, he would adequately express that.
True. And because he's a masterful filmmaker in that regard, he is saying a lot, and all throughout the film, anytime that anything that society of the French during that time period would have had a negative label or connotation or anything like that, whether it be sexist in its derivation or whether it be accurate, he completely shatters those labels.
Absolutely.
In her character and her representation.
And like Truffaut uses techniques to literally burn the image of Catherine in your mind with his freeze frame techniques of her laughing or grimacing.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's burning these images into your mind on purpose, not because he wants you to not trust her. He wants you to worship her. He wants you to. Mm-hmm. And I think he's successful in having you do that. And of course, a large part of that success just rests on the natural abilities of Moreau. She's a person like Marilyn Monroe or James Dean or River Phoenix who just born to be photographed because they just have some kind of expressive qualities to their physicality. Mm. And most of the time, all you would have to do with great muses is rest a camera on them, and people will want to see it. And those are very special people. There's like 2 a generation, maybe 3 tops. And she was one of them. And
she was incredibly talented because throughout the film, they showcase the talent of the actors and what they perform. There's a boxing and a fencing scene happening at the same time.
She sings a lovely waltz.
Yep, and the waltz is really well done. I really enjoyed it. And I was not cringy whatsoever, completely removed from any element of that. It was very sincere and beautiful, and aesthetically sounding.
I think that the pace is set up beautifully by the opening credits because before the opening credits, it's a black screen, and I might not remember it perfectly, but it's Catherine's voiceover going like, "You said I love you, I said go," like, and it was pretty amazing. And then it leaps into this manic, fast-paced life of Jules and Jim. And Martin Scorsese famously said, "If I could have directed anything, I wish I could have directed the opening credits of Jules and Jim." And you could see where Truffaut's mastery influenced people like Scorsese or Tarantino, but mostly Scorsese. The pace of Goodfellas is very similar to the pace of Jules and Jim. It is constantly on the move, constantly feels like it's setting up something, because it's very fast, very energetic. The camera, is very fast and energetic. The cuts are amazing. How he chooses to express things is astonishing.
Mm-hmm. Going on beyond that, and so I would like to get into some of the thematics that were being portrayed. Particularly, I noticed that there are some criticisms which I think miss the mark in what Truffaut is trying to express in this film. I'm not going to mention any specific criticism, but I do know it is known that some people, especially people with a more conservative mindset and values, might view Catherine as a negative figure, as you were saying earlier, as a false hero or heroine. At the same time, I would like to address the fact that it is moral in its pronunciations. And Truffaut I think he's going beyond the morality. He's trying to go beyond what so many people participate in, what I call sophistry. And he really wants to just get at something more authentic, and he wants to talk about, like relationships and loves and what it's really like, and what certain kinds of relationships can be like, and there's nothing good or bad about them, and to paint the ending as some kind of conclusion to the morality that's happening. I think that is incorrect. And that's what I would really like to get at, is that you do have to get away from that idea that Truffaut is trying to say something negative about either Catherine, or actually about any of the characters. Exactly. Really. And really what he's trying to get at is he's just trying to say, like, there's just this wild ride happening, and you can hop on board, or you can try and interpret it however you want to interpret it. But at the same time, it is a wild ride, and you're going to take what you can out of it, and it's going to reveal more about yourself than it is going to reveal about what was actually being said. I mean, at least in that perspective of trying to understand the morality being expressed.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think morality even enters into the question of like a lightning in a bottle,
Mm-hmm.
which is what Catherine was. She was a superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't seek to control her, and you can't apply like any idea of morality to her, because she kind of like just transcends all of that.
Yeah.
Because when you're in her presence, you are completely devoted to her, and it's not about morality. It's about the most insane kind of passion you could feel. What they want to feel is alive and always interested and never bored.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
what Catherine offers them.
And she does a really good job, because I felt that I didn't feel bored whatsoever throughout the film. I felt enchanted,
Mm-hmm.
would be the word I would use. And beyond that, I would also say, like, I thought she was stunning. She was beautiful. I fell in love with her within the first 30 minutes, especially after the statue motif was expressed. And then it was later solidified even further.
I have a major thing for her, a major crush. I think every cinephile should, though, because she's just extraordinary, and it even goes beyond just like simple attraction. Like there's something about her that these different directors saw in her. Of course, she's beautiful, but there's something even, dare I say, like non-corporeal, like something like completely.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly metaphysical about her. If you get a romanticist like Truffaut to photograph her, yeah, of course, like it mythologizes itself while you're watching.
It's almost like it's like watching, and it's the difference between like a girl, a lady, and a woman. Like she's a woman. She's exactly what you would expect of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of their own selves, and they are all like self-contained and beautiful, and they're their own worlds.
Did you want to talk about a scene that happened early on when they're actually Jules is speaking ill of women, like quoting Baudelaire? Fuck these French philosophers. And
Baudelaire.
Thank you. And he's quoting his most sexist tirades, and Jim is just listening dutifully without really protesting. He's just listening.
And then she points that out, that you should be protesting. And he's like, well, I do protest because I don't really agree with his ramblings at 2 in the morning.
Exactly. And so she takes it upon herself to make a statement by jumping into the river, the lake.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Shattering the illusion that, she has to act like a proper lady in this particular kind of society. She's a woman. She's free to do whatever she wants. She's a human just like us. Mm-hmm. And that's what's amazing about it. And I think that's what brings that sort of like that love and relevance, because she's not like a mythological, unobtainable thing. She wants to talk to you and see you smile, and she wants your attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when she jumps in there, her hat, she can't retrieve it. And you picked up on some...
Yeah, like how it was interesting how the river was flowing and the hat was like a material object, and it was just for a couple of seconds, but it was just being drifting down that little canal where she jumped in. And it was just, to me, it was symbolic of her being able to just discard all of the material completely in that moment, and then just to be this changing thing at the same time, which is ineffable and beautiful. And I think that's something I think is indicative of love, and that's what's great about that, is love is like this ineffable thing where you have these contradictory points of view at the same time, and you see both sides.
And I like the voiceover narration in the car, where they're like when they're leaving from the canal where she just jumped in, and they're like, none of them brought up the fact that she jumped, and Catherine just sat there grinning like a general who has just conquered an army, and that's pretty fantastic. And it's also cool because she does another power play immediately after, where she requests to meet Jim at the cafe the next morning, and she shows up late on purpose. And then when she shows up and he hasn't waited for her, that's when he gets a call that they're going to get married. So it's a constant... it's very interesting.
There was more as well. Not only the statue motif being carried forward into that hat being drifting down into the canal, but also there was the other motifs later on where, like, for example, there's one particular scene that stood out, and it was towards the end when you re-met Teresa, the girl who's the train smoker.
Yeah, I love
right.
her.
She was gorgeous and wonderful, and you saw that Jim was talking to her, and they were catching up, and then Jim was just kind of like saying hello to everyone else. Like, you could tell that Catherine was still on his mind. That's how eclipsing her presence is. That in the face of someone who is a lady like Teresa, and she's following the what society wants a lady to look like or whatever, and then to compare that with Catherine, and Catherine, it just blows her out of the water, and you're just like, it's just like, to me, that's what's really enchanting about that. It's just that you know that this girl Teresa is interesting and she's her own person, but you just can't help but remember Catherine.
Yeah, there's no recovery from Catherine once you've experienced the goddess. What are you gonna do?
And I think that was really well done. That he just kind of slipped that in there. Truffaut did, and that was really masterfully done. So that was just something I wanted to gush over real quick. But I wanted to ask you if you had a favorite scene.
Yeah, one of the most famous scenes in art house history, where she puts on where she dresses as a man. And they run through the tunnel. They race through the tunnel. That scene is just full of so much life, and it's a signature scene.
It really is full of life.
And she is just fucking glorious. That's the thing. I think Truffaut's purpose with this film, one of the major purposes, was to make you fall madly in love with his muse, with his star. And so a lot of this analysis is going to be gushing over her, and that's the point. If you don't walk out of this film gushing over Jean Moreau, then it obviously just didn't speak to you. Like it. Mm-hmm. That's one of the main points of this film. And Truffaut is incredibly successful.
He does a really good job.
I'm always astonished by how well put together the film is, for all of its moving parts within the same exact scene. Dialogue, lightning fast dialogue with the voiceover narration. Meanwhile, the camera work is dazzling 360-degree rotations on the constant. It is such an energetic film that feels like it's in love with life. If I had to walk away from this and be asked about what I think of Truffaut's character as an artist, I would have to say one that loves life.
That's a really good summary of that, of the thematic quality that he brought to the table, something that I found quite fascinating. I made a joke with you earlier, but I'll repeat it here. When there was those moments where, especially Catherine, and her face was being sort of still shot like a photo op, right? And I was like, is this YouTube video not loading for a split second? But right after that, I was just like, that was really well done and clever that Truffaut included that, because that's a lot like how, especially when we have a particularly happy memory about a specific event, we remember the faces of the people involved, because that's like how we evolve, right?
Absolutely.
As humans. And we remember that happy expression, and Truffaut knew that, and he used it, and he did it really well.
And like you said, that's the way memory works. And like I said earlier,
memory that's happy.
Burning the image of her into your brain. And that's a recurring technique. It's not exclusive to Catherine, because he does use it when Jules and Jim meet again for the first time after the war, and they shake hands and froze.
Mm-hmm. And that was, to me, another indication of the happiness and memory, and how Truffaut was masterful in his psychological understanding of that particular way in which humans view their happy memories. So I was just like, wow, this guy.
And there are subtle there are subtle hints to it is. I think it's an anti-war film as well.
Yes,
because Jules is entirely different after the war. Before the war, he is loud. He's very rambunctious. He's just as alive as Jim. Jim has changed too, but not as much, because Jim is on the winning side of the war, right? So Jules has to also carry around the impotence not only of losing the woman, or feeling like he's losing the woman's attention that he loves, but he also, his country lost, so he has to carry that impotence as well. And he's very different, very focused on his daughter, very focused on a Dragonfly book he's writing. He's very, very different after the war, but I think it's nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a well done impotence. There's no talk of PTSD, but you can tell he's changed.
Yeah, I did get that subtle feeling afterward, especially when he was, when Catherine came into his room right after Jim and them had their kind of final conflict over whether they could have a child or not, and Catherine goes into Jules' room and starts talking to him, and she's crying, and they're like kind of rubbing their faces on each other, and this kind of puppy love kind of way, and you could tell he was just like, he seemed ajar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the word I would use, and that is really well done that the actor was able to portray something so complex in such a short scene.
Yeah, the war robbed a large part of him.
Mm-hmm.
He was less of a bohemian after that.
Yeah, it's almost like he realized, I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah, Jim at the table talking about how, he'll be an inquiring mind even though that's not a career yet. Whereas Jules, like I said, is contented to hide himself away in his bedroom office, taking snapshots of insects, talking about writing a love story where all the characters are insects. It's almost like he's removed himself from... he is really detached.
Mm.
Except for, he's a great father, though. He's the one who loves that kid. Playing horsey with her and everything like that.
Yeah. And that was really good because those scenes were also really full of life.
It's also really good because Jules is the only survivor of the films. So that's really good, too.
True.
So,
yeah, and that's a good thing that it's done that way. I'm glad that Truffaut had the foresight to see that and to make the ending in that way where the child is not harmed.
Exactly.
To a certain extent, obviously. But, tragedy happens all the time in life. And it's just one of those things where, I don't know, it's like it's part of the journey, it's part of the quest of life to have moments of tragedy to emphasize the moments of happiness and to bring meaning through it all. And I'm glad that he was able to get away from a lot of the I think the unjustified criticisms, especially by people, particularly certain Christians who have said certain things about the film being anti-Christian in its moral sentiment, which is again a mistake. I think it's completely missing the point of the film.
Yeah.
The point of the film being, more than about life, more than about that. It's about liberty. It's about, more than the pursuit of happiness and love and relationships. It's about like trying to really get at like what it really means to be a person and to be in love and to enjoy that for the ride that it is.
I can't believe Christians would rail against this movie because it's also about the complete pleasure of being devoted.
Some Christians. Obviously,
yeah.
I can't speak.
Well,
for
also you would
demographic.
have someone like Godard and Truffaut. We're still friends at this time, but this film would definitely fall under the Godard criticism of over sentimentality, of insincerity, where I believe Godard would be missing the point as well. That would just show that he doesn't understand what an idealized form is, or why idealized forms have their place in films, like why it's actually a good thing that Truffaut painted this woman so impossibly. Like, it benefits film, the medium, not real life. He's not Roberto Rossellini, after all. He's not a neo-realist. He's a pioneer of the French New Wave, which was all about postmodernism and inversing concepts.
Right. And it just carrying off of what you just said right there, I think that's a big part of the language that Truffaut is employing. He's really trying to describe something that is almost indescribable. Right?
Absolutely. That's what film is. A lot of people believe that's what film is for. To describe the indescribable, to try to express the ineffable. And you can actually do that successfully on film, whereas you cannot obviously do that in real life.
And then the fact that Truffaut breaks a lot of the rules to make an even more emphasizing and meaningful point.
Mm-hmm.
Is just not only part of that new the French New Wave, but also it extends, I think, beyond and outward into Truffaut and his views on film and filmmaking, and that's more authentic as well.
And all of these, like what you just were bringing up, like the techniques and the ways that he chooses to express this is so self-aware that I think it even adds more to like the idea that Truffaut knows this is a film. He's not trying to trick you. He's just trying to appeal to emotions you didn't know you had. To a range of emotionality that maybe you're cut off from outside of film, because like we said, Truffaut is one of the most infamously obsessed cinephiles of all time, if not the most obsessed one, because he was institutionalized and kicked out of the army for his film obsession because no one understood cinephilia back then. And maybe I think he feels the same way. I think he's completely in love with the film. Whereas Godard has a famous quote of, like, you can't love a woman like you do a film. Like, a woman is alive and a film is dead. Truffaut, I think, would argue to the bitter end against that concept. I think he thinks films are alive. That's why I keep coming back to, if I had to walk away from this film thinking one thing, it's to go and try to experience as much life as I can. Because there's, like, so much passion in the world. What would you walk away from this thinking?
I would walk away from it... man, that's a really tough question. I would walk away probably saying that it's a film that really challenged my views on sexuality in a very healthy way that I was not familiar with and that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the fact that it was not in this like disgusting or creepy or horrifying. All of that was completely just not there whatsoever. Right. And because that's not there, to me it added more life, it added more meaning, because it wasn't even though it was a tragedy at the ends, there was not an element of horror whatsoever.
Absolutely.
And because there's that complete lack of thematic, you know that Truffaut, because he's a master, he is trying to say something good at the end of it all.
Absolutely. He's a master, not just a master, but like his favorite filmmakers were Orson Welles and Alfred Hitchcock, and had just file cabinets full of just writings about their work. So if he wanted to make the end suspenseful, if he wanted to like make it truly horrific and devious, he could have easily done that, because he knows he knows the proper Hitchcockian way to do that. But he didn't, because once again, like, the purpose of this film is to make you just love being in Catherine's presence, even if that's your dying moment.
And that's another big part of the takeaway for this, is the absence of certain elements and tropes and themes are, to me, a re-emphasis and a reinforcement of what Truffaut is trying to say loud and clear about the particular conversations he's having about love and relationships and how they're dynamic and fluid and changing. And that is how it is, quite really is for most people. We don't have one relationship our whole lives. I mean, I can't speak for everyone. Obviously, there are those staunch, loyal monogamists, absolutely. At the same time, Truffaut knows that that's not the majority of humans. That's not the majority of human experience. And so I think he's very, I'm trying to, not only brilliant, but he knows the sophistication of that.
I think he's one of the most empathetic filmmakers of all time.
Yeah, like, he's met a lot of people. I can definitely see that.
That's the thing. I think he's met a lot of people through film. I think film, like a Tarantino or a Scorsese, I think film has taught him most of his empathy. And like, he sees something like beyond ineffable, beyond magical in these pieces, and he's able to recreate them as if they're there. I mean,
and it seems effortless, by the way.
Masters are rare. So the way that they learn their trade should also be rare and unique.
And and the fact that he's sculpting away this incredibly complex language, siphoning all of the valuable and wonderful pieces of information from that book by by
Roche.
Roche. Yeah, sorry, stumbling on my words here. But yeah, he's able to really make a sculpture. It's like almost like an art piece in a way. Because
Well, it's funny that you say sculpture, right? Because she's a statue.
I mean, it really is. That's what he's doing. He's making an entire sort of like image through sculpting, and he's doing this through a communication medium that requires a lot of dialogue, or even the lack of dialogue in many parts of the film are adding to that sculpting process.
Any final thoughts?
I would recommend anyone watching this, have an open mind. Don't be constrained by, because it is French New Wave. It will challenge certain views on certain topics, and it will do it in a grappling way, one that will keep you enchanted, entertained, and not only that, but aesthetically pleasing.
Of course.
Yeah. And that's something that I really enjoyed the most about it, was just how every scene was very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. My final thoughts is a good film could give misfits a wonderful place to go. And I often find myself watching Jules and Jim when I'm lonely. And this film seems to have a comforting flavor to it. I think it's a very comforting film because I think that Truffaut was also one of the most comforting filmmakers.
Yeah, it's interesting because after you finish watching it, you do get a sense of comfort afterward. Like you were able to climb over a really steep and difficult hill, but you were running and having fun with your friends while doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful time.